Arizona Territory, 1879. The fire took less than an hour to burn through the house, but it stole everything from her. Calla Granger stood barefoot in the blackened frame of what used to be her home. Smoke still curled up from the ashes, clinging to the air like sorrow. Her hands were covered in soot, her dress torn, her face streaked with tears she had not realized were falling. Behind her, two small boys clung to each other, Forrest, barely 7, and Fletcher, for silent and wide-eyed with the kind of fear that ages a child too fast. The townsfolk of Dawson Hollow kept their distance. A few had come running when the flames lit the night sky, buckets in hand, but none had stayed long after. Not when they saw it was Calla's home. Not when they saw it was her. Should have known better than to let her raise them boys alone. Someone muttered not far off. She brought this on herself. Another whispered, too loud to be accidental. Calla heard it all. She always did. Ever since her husband died 5 years ago in a rail accident, whispers followed her like shadows. They said she was cursed, that trouble found her, that she had nothing left to give. Now, with no roof over her head, no food for her sons, and the last of her savings gone up in flames, it seemed they were right. But just when the weight of it all nearly buckled her knees, she heard the slow tread of boots behind her. "Ma'am," a low voice said. She turned, squinting through the haze. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, with a dust-streaked coat and a wide-brimmed hat low over his eyes. His horse waited behind him, reins loose. He looked like he had been riding hard, but his gaze was steady, searching her like he was trying to see past the soot and ruin. "I am not taking charity," Calla said before he could speak again. Her voice cracked, but she held her chin high. "We will be fine." "Ma'am," he said again, softer this time. "My name's Silas Avery. I saw the smoke on my way into town. Figured maybe someone needed help." Forrest stepped closer to her, gripping her skirt. Fletcher peeked out from behind his brother. Silas looked at the boys, then back at her. "You got a place to go?" he asked. Calla hesitated. "No, I got a ranch west of here. About half a day's ride. I got room, food, warm beds. Just till you get sorted." She narrowed her eyes. "You do not know us." "No, ma'am. But I know what it looks like when someone is close to breaking. And I do not like standing by when I could do something." She looked down at her boys. Forrest's lips were blue from cold. Fletcher's hand trembled in hers. "Just for a few days," she said. Silas nodded once. "Fair enough." He helped her lift the boys onto the horse, then offered his hand to her. She hesitated only a second before placing her palm in his. It was rough, calloused a working man's hand, but it was steady, warm. They rode out without looking back. The ranch was tucked against the red ridges outside town, surrounded by cottonwood trees and sun-scorched grass. It was not much a main house, a barn, a few outbuildings, but it was clean and alive. Cattle dotted the hills. Chickens clucked near the porch. The smell of bread drifted from the kitchen window. Calla stared at it, stunned. "You live here alone?" Silas swung down from his horse and nodded. "Been running it myself the last 4 years. Neighbor checks in sometimes, brings supplies. But mostly it's just me." He helped the boys down, then reached for her again. She let him. Inside, the house was warm and quiet. He showed the boys a small room off the hall and gave them quilts and a wooden box of carved animals to play with. Then he turned to her. "You want to clean up? There is a pump out back. Water is hot if you boil it in the stove." Calla nodded slowly. "Thank you." He tipped his hat and left her alone. That night, she could not sleep. The boys were curled up in the room next door, safe, fed, warm. She sat at the edge of the bed Silas had given her, staring at the fire in the hearth. He had asked nothing of her, not a single thing. And still, she did not understand why he had helped. The next morning, she found him in the barn, mending a fence rail. His sleeves were rolled, sweat on his neck, eyes focused. "You always take in strangers?" she asked, arms crossed. He looked up. "No, just ones who look like they have not had a kind hand in a long time." Her throat clenched. "You do not know who I am," she said. "I know enough. You did not leave. You did not run. You stayed between those boys and the fire. That tells me more than gossip ever could." She blinked back, sudden heat in her eyes. "I can work," she said. "Clean, cook, whatever needs doing. I did not bring you here for that. But I will. I have to." He nodded once. "All right." Days passed. Then a week. Calla scrubbed floors, cooked meals, taught the boys their letters at the kitchen table. Silas worked the land, fixed the roof, hauled water. Sometimes he came in with dust in his hair and handed her wildflowers without a word. She never asked why, but she kept them, always. He was quiet, but not cold. And the more she watched him, the way he knelt to show Forrest how to tie a rope, the way he lifted Fletcher high so he could pick apples from the tree, the more something soft opened in her. One evening, she stepped outside and found him staring at the hills, hands on his hips. "You miss having people around?" she asked. He glanced at her. "Sometimes, but I never minded being alone." She nodded. "I used to be happy. Before the gossip. Before the fire." "You still could be," he said, voice low. She looked at him, really looked at him. "Why did you help me, Silas?" He turned to her, eyes steady. "Because they said you were worthless after the fire. But I looked at you, and I saw a woman who stood between her children and a wall of flame. I saw someone who kept going even when everyone turned their back. That is not worthless, Calla. That is priceless." Her breath caught. He stepped closer. "You are not broken. You are just tired of fighting alone." She did not speak, but she reached out, and he caught her hand gently. There was no rush, no declarations. Just her, standing in the last light of day, and him, holding her like she was made of more than ash and ruin. And for the first time in a long time, she believed maybe she was. A week after the fire, a late spring storm rolled in from the east, sweeping dust through the cottonwoods and shaking loose the scent of wet earth. Calla had just finished stitching a patch on Forrest's trousers when she noticed the wind shifting, thickening with the promise of rain. She set the mended cloth aside and stepped onto the porch, arms folded against the breeze. Silas was walking the fence line, coat tugged tight at the collar. He paused when he saw her, then angled toward the porch, boots crunching over gravel. His hat brim was damp, his cheeks ruddy with weather. "You mind storms?" he asked as he climbed the steps. "Not unless they catch me unprepared," she said, brushing a curl from her cheek. "This one's got a restless edge." He nodded. "Fence'll hold. Barn's shut tight. We'll ride it out." She watched him lean against the porch post, hands loose at his sides. The quiet between them was no longer strained. It had taken on a shape, like something built rather than fallen into. "You always know what needs doing," she said. Silas glanced at her, but didn't answer right away. When you live with land this bare, you learn to listen close. It'll tell you what it needs, if you pay attention. A low rumble of thunder curled over the hills. Calla stepped down into the yard, her boots sinking slightly into the softening ground. "Do you ever get tired of listening?" He hesitated, then followed her down. "Sometimes I wonder what it'd be like to be heard just as much." She looked at him, surprised. "You don't speak much about yourself," she said. "Not much to speak of. My folks died when I was young. Spent some years drifting. Ended up here. Land was cheap after the war. Hard, but honest." He paused, then added, "I never thought much about company until I saw you standing in the ashes." Calla turned away, watching the sky press lower. Lightning forked behind the ridge. "I didn't mean to need anyone," she said. "But that night, when you took us in, I didn't have the strength to refuse. I didn't do it so you'd owe me something. I know." He stepped closer, not touching her, not crowding. Just near enough for her to feel the warmth of him. "You've taken care of everything around here like it's yours," he said. "You didn't have to. I couldn't just sit still. I needed to feel useful again. You are." She met his eyes, and something in her steadied. "Fletcher asked if we were going to stay," she said quietly. "What did you tell him?" I didn't know what to say. Silas looked down, then back at her. "If you asked, I'd find work for you. For as long as you want it. The boys too, when they're old enough." A drop of rain struck her hand. Then another, fat and cold. Calla reached out, her fingers brushing the back of his. "I'm not asking for charity. I wouldn't offer it if that's what I thought this was." She held his gaze, the space between them tightening like the sky above. "I don't know what this is," she said. He didn't speak, but his hand turned in hers, his fingers closing gently around her own. The rain began in earnest then, soft at first, then hard enough to patter against the porch roof like drummed fingers. "I should check on the boys," she said, though she made no move to step away. "They're inside. Safe." She nodded. "They like you. I like them." She looked up at him, rain slipping over her cheeks like tears she hadn't earned. "Nobody's liked us in a long while." Silas lifted his free hand, slow, and brushed a drop from her brow with the back of his knuckle. Then they've been fools. She didn't answer. Just leaned into him, her forehead resting lightly against his shoulder. He didn't shift, didn't pull her closer or push her away. They stood that way as the storm broke open around them, and inside the house, the boys' laughter echoed from the parlor, faint and bright as birdsong. That night, Calla lingered by the bedroom window while the rain eased to a whisper. A candle flickered low beside her, casting her shadow across the wooden floor. Her hands were idle for once, folded in her lap without purpose. She turned when she heard a quiet knock against the doorframe. "I didn't mean to wake you," Silas said. "You didn't." He stepped inside, his coat draped over one arm. "I thought you might want this." Storm's still got a chill in it. She took the coat from him, fingers brushing his forearm. "Thank you." He started to turn away, then hesitated. "I've been wondering something." "What's that?" "When the fire came, what was the first thing you thought of?" She swallowed. "The boys. Then the ledger. Then nothing. Just heat and sound." He nodded, silent a moment. "You didn't think of yourself." "There wasn't time." "There was. You just didn't take it." She looked down. "I didn't think I mattered enough." Silas stepped forward, slow but sure. "You do." Calla's eyes lifted to his, the words catching something deep in her. He didn't kiss her, didn't need to. But when he left, she held his coat to her chest and breathed in the scent of rain and sweat and safety, and for the first time in years, slept through the night. By mid-May, the cottonwoods had leafed out fully, their pale green shimmering in the wind like wet silk. The creek that cut across the edge of Silas's land filled with snowmelt, running fast and clear. The boys spent long afternoons tracing its banks, mud up to their knees, while Calla hung linens between the posts behind the house, sleeves rolled and brow damp. Silas had begun teaching Forrest how to saddle a horse properly. Fletcher, too small for a mount, helped by fetching curry combs and holding bridles with both hands like sacred things. Calla watched from a distance, never interrupting, her hands busy with chores, but her eyes drawn again and again to the quiet way Silas taught. No shouting, no correcting for pride, just even words and patient hands. One morning, after the boys had gone to the barn, Silas lingered at the kitchen table while Calla poured coffee into 2 tin cups. She set his down and took the chair across from him. "Calf went breech last night," he said. "Took me near an hour to turn it. Damned thing kicked like it wanted to stay inside." "Did it live?" He nodded. "Stubborn little heifer. Reminds me of someone." She raised an eyebrow, but he just sipped his coffee. "I was thinking," he said after a moment, "if you're staying through summer, it might help to give the boys some steadiness. A routine. I've been teaching them letters and numbers in the evenings, when they're not too worn out. I noticed." He rested his forearms on the table. "There's an old schoolhouse 10 miles south. Closed a while back, but it still stands. Needs repairs. Thought maybe, if you were willing, we could fix it up. You'd have a place to teach. Maybe even draw in a few neighbor kids." Calla blinked. "You do that?" "I've got tools. Wood. Time." She traced the rim of her cup with one finger. "I haven't taught since before Forrest was born. It was just a mining camp school, back outside Santa Fe. Nothing fancy. Doesn't need to be fancy. Just steady." He paused. "I figure you'd want something that's yours." She looked at him fully then, something unreadable in her face. "You keep giving me space like I belong here." "You do." He didn't look away when he said it. She didn't either. Later that week, they hitched the wagon and rode out with saws, nails, and oilcloth bundled beneath the seat. The schoolhouse stood in a hollow near a dry arroyo, half swallowed by time. One shutter hung loose on a rusted hinge, and the roof had slumped on one side, but the bones of the place were solid. While Silas climbed the ladder to pry off warped shingles, Calla swept out broken glass and dust, her skirts tied at the knees. Birds called from the rafters, startled by the sudden stirring of life. By evening, the window frames were square again, and the sagging door had been braced. Calla sat on the new front step, her hands blistered, hair laced with bits of straw. Silas joined her, wiping sweat from his brow with a faded kerchief. She didn't speak at first, just looked out over the dry field. Then, quiet as breath, she said, "I used to dream of a house like this. Not big, just full of voices." He considered that for a long moment. "You think you'd want that again?" I don't know. She turned toward him. When I imagined it before, I never pictured it without my husband. I never thought I'd have to start over with boys who barely remember their father's voice. They remember yours. She gave a soft laugh, but it caught in her throat. I'm not sure I've done right by them. I've done what I could, but it never felt like enough. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. There's a tree out behind the barn. Real weathered. Lost half its branches to lightning a few years back. Still puts out leaves every spring. She glanced at him, unsure. Point is, he said, something don't have to be whole to be strong. It just has to keep growing. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of juniper and dust. A hawk circled high above, a black shape against the gold sky. You say things like that, she said, and I forget how to hold myself together. I'm not asking you to. They sat in silence then, not because there was nothing left to say, but because what had been spoken didn't need explaining. That night, back at the ranch, after the boys had drifted off to sleep curled beneath quilts, Calla stepped into the hall and found Silas by the back door, lantern in hand. He was looking out across the field, face unreadable in the low light. She reached for his hand without a word, threading her fingers between his. He didn't flinch, just turned until they were facing each other. I don't know what this is, she said, voice barely above a whisper, but it's more than I thought I'd be allowed. He lifted her hand to his chest, holding it there where she could feel his heartbeat. I'm not offering you a rescue, he said. Just a place to rest. She stepped in closer, her brow against his jaw. Resting sounds like a fine place to begin. They stood that way until the lantern burned low. Outside, coyotes called from the far hills. Inside, the house held steady, warmed by something more certain than fire. The first real warmth of June settled over the valley, thick with sage and the low drone of bees in the grass. The boys rose earlier now, drawn by the long light and the promise of the outdoors. Calla sent them out with bread wrapped in cloth and a firm list of what they were not to climb or chase. They listened with the half-hearted obedience common to boys who'd begun to feel safe again. Calla stayed behind that morning, scrubbing the last of the winter grime from the front windows of the house. The glass was old, warped slightly at the corners, but the view beyond was clear. The barn, the slope of pasture, and Silas's figure in the distance, bent to the task of digging new fence post holes. He moved with that same quiet rhythm she'd come to recognize, not hurried, not hesitant, just steady. When he returned in the early afternoon, shirt damp, arms streaked with dirt, she was trimming the overgrown lilac bush beside the porch. You ever stop working? He asked, dropping his gloves by the door. She brushed a leaf from her shoulder. If I stop, I start to think too long. Working keeps my mind from chewing itself raw. Silas sat on the porch step and reached for the canteen resting beside the boot scraper. What's it chewing on now? She hesitated, then eased down beside him, her knees drawn up. The boy's forest especially, he's asking questions. About what happened before the fire. About why folks in town wouldn't look at us square. Silas drank, then passed her the canteen. What did you tell him? That some folks carry their own sorrow like a wound, and seeing someone else survive something makes theirs ache worse. His brow lifted slightly. I didn't say it quite like that, she added, but close enough. He watched the wind lift a curl from her temple. You want me to talk to him? She shook her head. No, but thank you. They sat in silence for a long while, the sound of the windmill ticking faintly from the barnyard. I keep thinking about that day, she said. The fire. Not the flames, just after. Standing there in the ruin. I heard them say it. Silas didn't speak, but his jaw tensed. They said I was worthless, that I'd brought it on myself. His voice was low. I know. You were the only one who didn't look away. I saw someone who hadn't fallen, just hadn't been helped up yet. She turned to him. Why? Why did you see that, when no one else would? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was steady. Because I've been in that place. After my father died, I drifted for years. Folks saw what they wanted. A drifter, a loner, not worth the trouble. But one man, an old rancher out near Globe, he gave me a place, tools, silence when I needed it. That silence saved me more than words ever could. Calla looked down at her hands, the palms calloused from weeks of labor. That's what you've given me. Not rescue. Just space to remember who I was before I got so tired. You've never stopped being her. She turned to him then, and for the first time, There was no hesitation in her voice. I don't want to leave. He met her gaze. I don't want you to. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. And not just for the boys. Not because I owe you anything. I know that. I want something steady. With you. If you want it too. Silas reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers with quiet certainty. I've been building this place for years, thinking it was for me alone. But everything I've done, every board I've nailed, every seed I've planted, it all makes more sense with you in it. She smiled, small and sure. That's the first time in a long while I've felt like I belonged in someone's future. You do. And not as some burden to carry. As someone I'd choose every day. A sudden crash from the barnyard broke the moment, followed by Fletcher's high shout and Forrest's laughing protest. Calla stood, brushing off her skirt. They've likely tied the milk bucket to the dog again, she said, already moving toward the yard. Silas followed, boots thudding against the porch planks. I'll take the dog, you take the bucket. She glanced back at him, her eyes bright. We make a good team. He gave a slow nod. We do. And just like that, without ceremony or promise spoken aloud, their life began. Not in some grand declaration, but in the shared rhythm of small things: the mended fence, the quiet evenings, the laughter of boys echoing through a house no longer haunted by silence. By late June, the schoolhouse was no longer a shell but a place with breath in it. Silas had hung a bell from the porch eaves, and Calla had scrubbed the floors until the wood grain showed through like rivers on a map. The desks, salvaged from the old mining camp school and hauled in one by one, bore the marks of former pupils' scratched initials, ink stains, the ghosts of lessons long past. The boys were the first to sit in them again, their faces bright with the pride of being part of something built from nothing. Calla kept a small box on the desk near the window with the few books she had left McGuffey readers, a Bible, and a dog-eared arithmetic primer. Silas had promised to ask around for more when he rode into Bisbee the following week. He never made promises lightly. That morning, she found him in the lean-to behind the barn, sharpening the blade of a scythe. The sun was high already, and his shirt was damp at the collar, sleeves rolled neat to the elbow. I've been thinking about the land just east of the creek, she said as she stepped into the shade. It's flat enough for a garden, if we can clear the scrub. He looked up, wiped the blade clean with a cloth. You want to grow something? Vegetables. Maybe herbs. I used to keep a kitchen patch before we lost everything. Her voice stayed even, but her eyes searched his. You'll need fencing. And a good hoe, he said. I'll set aside time to help dig the rows. I want to do it myself, she said. But I won't say no to help. His gaze held hers, quiet and certain. You'll have it. They cleared the patch over 3 days, side by side as the sun climbed high and the sweat ran into their eyes. Forrest helped stack the stones they pulled from the soil, and Fletcher dragged a stick along behind, pretending to plow. Calla's hands blistered again, this time beneath her nails. But when they finished, and she stood at the edge of the worked earth, she smiled without hesitation. That evening, she brought out a small tin of seeds, mostly dried beans and onions saved from the kitchen. She knelt to press them into the soil, and Silas joined her, his hands moving slow and sure beside hers. Feels like something real, she said, brushing dust from her palms. It is. She glanced at him. I didn't think I'd ever have that again. A place, a purpose. Someone beside me who sees me clear. I see you better every day, he said. She leaned against his shoulder, and neither of them moved for a long time. The wedding was quiet. Just the local preacher, Silas, Calla, and the boys. It took place beneath the cottonwood tree behind the house, with wildflowers tucked into mason jars and ribbons borrowed from the schoolhouse bell rope. Calla wore a blue dress she'd sewn herself, simple, with a row of pearl buttons at the collar. The boys stood proud beside her, Forrest holding the ring, Fletcher clinging to her hand until the vows began. Silas spoke without trembling, his voice low but steady. I've walked this land alone for years, and now I can't picture it without your footsteps beside mine. I promise to build a life that holds you, quiet and strong, for as long as I draw breath. Calla looked him in the eye when she answered. You never tried to fix me. You just made a space where I could become myself again. I promise to carry what we build together with care, every day that I'm given. They kissed once, and the boys hooped loud enough to startle the chickens. That night, They shared bread and stew on the porch, with the sun slipping low and the sound of laughter in the yard. No one from Dawson Hollow came, but Calla didn't feel their absence. She had her family now. By harvest, the garden had taken hold. The onions were small but strong, the beans tangled and full. The schoolhouse bell rang twice a week, calling in 5 children from nearby homesteads. Calla taught them with quiet authority, her voice firm, her smile rare but real. She kept the window open always, so she could hear the wind in the cottonwoods. Silas built her a table for the front of the classroom, carved her initials into the underside where only she would see. Sometimes he'd come sit at the back as the lesson ended, just to watch her speak. She never asked why. She knew. On the first frost morning, Calla woke early and found him already stoking the fire, the boys still curled beneath quilts in the next room. He looked up as she stepped into the kitchen, her shawl tight against her shoulders. "I was thinking," he said, "about adding a room onto the schoolhouse. A place for maps, maybe shelves for books, something that can grow with you." She crossed to him, laid her hand on his chest. "I've never known a man who gave me more room to be." "You fill it well," he said. They stood in silence, the warmth between them stronger than the hearth. Years passed. The garden grew, and so did the boys. Forrest learned to ride as strong as any ranch hand, and Fletcher took to carving wood, shaping animals from scraps with a skill that quieted him in a way nothing else could. The schoolhouse welcomed more children. Calla's hands stayed busy, but her heart was never tired again. They never left the ranch. They didn't need to. The land held everything they'd built: their labor, their laughter, their love. And in the quiet hours, when the wind swept low and the sky lit with stars, Silas would wrap his arm around her waist, and she'd lean against him, sure of the life they'd made. Not perfect, but true. They lay together at night, the window cracked, the cottonwoods whispering just outside. And when she slept, it was without fear. When she dreamed, it was of nothing lost, only all they still had to grow.